Hi all, this is Skate, and today I'm looking at the WZ-131G fake tank, the Tier 6 Chinese tank destroyer. And, well, it's not a bad tank. In fact, it's quite alright. It's just nothing extraordinary. For me, the line gets better and better as it goes up. I'm grinding this line at the moment. I'm not on a contributor account, I'm on my own account, which means any tank I'm playing, I start with 75% crew and have to do the grind just like you. I'm pointing that out because you'd be surprised just how often people say, "Ah, yeah, but you don't understand what the pain's like to grind a tank." I've grinded every single tank in this game, except the new line. I know what the grind's like. I mean, for example, in the replay right now, we are on a 7.4 second reload. With full equipment and 100% crew, you are looking a 6.74 second reload. So I'm not there yet in terms of full crew on this tank, for this replay anyway. But I still think it's a capable tank, and this game's quite funny, so I had to share it. I also think it gives a nice example of what the grind can be like. In terms of equipment, I am running in this a rammer. I'm running the defense system. And I'm actually running improved optics, but I later switched to camo net, which I found to be better for the tank. Aside from that, I am not running any other equipment, and to be honest, I don't see the point, because I'm not going to be keeping this tank. It's more of a grind-through tank for me. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a very bad tank. I think it's a support tank. I think it's best played at a little bit of range, and then late game using the mobility and the hit points you have saved to go clean up a little bit more. And that is because it has 36mm of armor on the front and 21 on the sides and 21 on the rear. As a comparative for you, the Nashorn has 30 on the front and 20 on the sides. In other words, this has 6 more on the front than a Nashorn, which we all know is shockingly squishy, and effectively the same side and rear armor. So this tank is very, very squishy. You can get occasionally lucky with some silly bounces on the gun mantlet. Don't guarantee it. If you do get a bounce, take it as an absolute blessing. So in terms of armor, that pretty much covers it. There is none. In terms of the gun, there's plenty to cover. I mean, it has very respectable penetration. It has 181mm of penetration with 2,493 damage per minute. Both very good figures for Tier 6. I mean, if you compare it to a Jag, now a Jag Panzer has 3,265 damage per minute, but it also only has 145mm of penetration and 220 alpha. This has 280 alpha with much more reliable penetration. So in terms of feel, that sort of alpha, that rate of fire, sort of damage per minute, and reliability on penetration, the gun feels very nice at Tier 6. The problem is, because of the armor, keeping the gun in the game. The other thing, by the way, is you only have 5 degrees of gun depression, which without a turret keeps it a little bit challenging in terms of you kind of have to overexpose the tank sometimes to get those shots in. I'm going to try and use the ridge by here to expose as little of my tank as I can, using as much gun depression as I can. But it's hard with 5 degrees of gun depression, or it's difficult at least. And as I've already said, you can guarantee anything that hits you is going to penetrate. You're going to be very lucky if you get a bounce on that mantlet. So the game is try not to get shot, which is why it's very good with that gun and with that armor as a support role. The other thing is the mobility. Being in a support role doesn't necessarily mean I have to sit at the back of the map and not move until the very end of the game. Quite the opposite. It means you have no armor, but you have mobility, which means you can keep moving around, moving position slightly to get those shots off and get damage done. I'm in a 1 versus 3 in this game, and I've just taken it down to a 1 versus 2, but I am against 2 tank destroyers, one of which is a touch and go whether or not they could finish me off. If they check their HE penetration, they could just splash a HE straight into me. The SU-100Y has 65mm of penetration on its HE. Again, remember this thing only has 36mm of armor, so the only thing I have to survive is my mobility. I certainly don't have the view range because I'm not 100% crew. What I'm trying to play to my advantage is using the mobility to get me to different spots, remaining stationary, and while remaining stationary, obviously my camo value is better, so hoping they move to try and find me during this circumstance basically means I might spot them before they spot me. As it happens, I did spot this SU before he spotted me. I'm going to try to take a shot at his cupola. I do miss, which means I am going to get spotted for that. But when I first started playing this tank, that surprised me. I spotted him, and I don't have 100% crew, and he didn't spot me until I fired. The more I play this tank, the more I realised it has a very, very good camo value, which is why I switched out from my optics to my camo net. So having a good gun, having good camo value, and having good mobility with no armor basically does throw this thing into a support role. Touching more on mobility, actually, does anyone else find it's really strange with this tank, its mobility? You can kind of let go and it feels like you're a bit laggy. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I don't get it with any other tank. I just find I let go of the controls and it kind of keeps going a little bit. More than any other tank usually does. Like when you've got ping issues. Sounds a bit insane now I'm talking and saying it out loud, but that's how it feels. It is bizarre now I've said it out loud, but that is kind of how it feels like I got some form of ping issues. I was aiming for the tracks on this SU-100Y twice. I did take a shot off him. He obviously didn't check his HE, but that does mean because of his reload and because of my reload, I can take him out before he reloads again. Interestingly enough, the SU comes around the corner. I just tuck in, dodge his shot, which means I can quite comfortably come out and take a shot in return. I shouldn't have survived that, but I did. So that was a nice little Kolobanovs in the tank when I first bought it. But yeah, going back to that mobility thing, comment if you've had a strange circumstance like that with this tank. Aside from that, I do have to say in terms of mobility, it is a nippy little tank. I mean, it has the same sort of power to weight ratio as an M18 Hellcat. That basically translates to, it gets to its top speed very nicely, but it has a below average traverse speed. That's quite significant. When you are going full speed and you're trying to traverse, doesn't exactly work out. In fact, it's only got a couple of degrees more traverse than an 88. Completely unmodified, this thing has 25 degrees of track traverse. An 88 has 20, a Nashorn has 31, SU-100Y has 30, Hellcat 30, Churchill gun carrier even has 29, ARL V39, which isn't known for being a stupidly fast turning tank, has 28, but again this thing has 25. So when you're trying to turn at full speed, it kind of feels like it's got a bit of a broken track. And to me, again, that throws this thing in a support role, because getting mediums up close and personal to you when you're in this can very quickly translate to you are in a lot of trouble, because you don't have any ability of shaking them off once they get on your butt, unless you can, well, you can't even pry them off, you're too light, and you can guarantee all the shots they hit you with while you're trying to get around is going to penetrate. It's going to end bad news very, very quickly. Let's just put it from that perspective. So try your best to keep your mediums away from you as much as possible. Now, in a turretless tank destroyer, some people will do that at all costs anyway, but there's tanks which I feel can survive that circumstance of being close with medium tanks. There's many turretless tank destroyers, due to the size of them, due to the weight of them, you can peel them off you, and because you've got armour, you can bounce them. With one of these, no, there's just no hope whatsoever. They can push you round, they can pick on you, they can bully you all day long. And the next thing I'm going to comment on the tank makes me sound a little OCD, but it annoys the hell out of me every single time I look at this tank. And it's completely ridiculous, but it just annoys me. And I can't unsee it now I've seen it. But this is a nice little model. It's got tools on the back of it, it's got a log on the back. I really can't stop staring at that log, because I find it bizarre, and the reason being is if you look where it's mounted to the chassis, it's perfectly dead straight, not a pixel out of place in between those two pieces. Yet, look at the edges of the log. They've curled them up on both sides, which obviously makes it look like a more realistic log. But when, it's so stupid, but when you go from a pixel perfect straight bit in the middle between those two brackets, followed by the ends curling up, it just looks stupid. And it does sound OCD, and just like my earlier comments, I sound ridiculous pointing it out. But since I saw it, I can't unsee it. Look at it! You can't unsee it once you've seen it. It's like the ISU-152. Once you look at it from the top and you see a robot, you will never not see the robot. Can you see what I mean though? Look. every pixel perfectly in line in between the logs. But on the outside, no. You could do the whole log like that and it would still fit on the brackets. No. I know it's ridiculous, but I can't unsee it and it's bugging me for some reason. But yeah, there we are. If you haven't seen that or you haven't noticed that and you're one of those people that can't unsee it either, you're welcome. Some people naturally don't notice that stuff and don't even care. Other people like myself who are a little bit strange go, yeah, can't unsee it. That's all I'm going to concentrate on when I'm playing this tank now. And it's going to annoy them a lot. Aside from that, if you're not enjoying this tank, stick with the line. Don't give up at this tank. Out of all the tanks in this new line, this one is the worst. Again, that doesn't mean this is a bad tank, but out of all the tanks tier for tier, they just keep getting better and better. It feels worse if you've played the tier 8 WZ-120. The tier 8 Chinese tank destroyer, which is brokenly OP, because you go into these things thinking, haha, it's going to have the same frontal armor. And no, it doesn't. It's quite the opposite. And then the tier 7 looks and feels like a bite-sized version of that tier 8 premium tank destroyer, which feels great. Until you get shot and you realise it doesn't have the armour. But the more you go up the tiers, the better they get. And I'm going to be grinding the line and throwing up videos as well. Tier 7 will be up in a few days, and Tier 8 will be up in a few days after that. But in our little support role there, in a Tier 7 game, we did 3,262 damage. We got 2 kills. And most importantly, although we weren't the focal point, which is what we need to be, is not being in the line of fire, we kept our gun busy for as long as possible. And in doing so, means you perform in this tank. But that's it for this video. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope it's of use to anyone who is grinding the line at the moment. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.